A solitary woodsman sheltered an expectant woman abandoned by her sibling. What he discovered went far beyond mere companionship. Snow descended in heavy, soundless curtains across Montana's desolate wilderness. White consumed brown, frost-masked. Decay, and at the edge of a weather-beaten ranch yard, a young woman stood chained to a cart like livestock awaiting slaughter. Her name was June, 22 years old, her belly swollen with new life, her lips split from the bitter cold. Her brother positioned himself several paces away, bartering with a cattleman who reeked of bourbon and hide. In her womb, nothing but rusted iron and the rhythmic pulse of an unborn soul. "She's sturdy," her brother declared, voice parched and callous. "Strong limbs, keeps quiet. 7 months along, but the infant will arrive healthy." The rancher examined her with lifeless eyes. "And she won't flee?" "She can't," her brother sneered. "Not any longer." That's when it occurred, a sudden, fierce thrust from within her womb. Not the familiar flutter, not the gentle movement of a developing child. This was a jolt, forceful and desperate, like a fist pounding from inside out. June's breathing halted. Her backbone stiffened. Another kick, then another. This wasn't agony. This was demand. She shut her eyes and murmured, "I feel you, little one, I feel you. And I promise I won't let them trade you away as well." Frost clung to her eyelashes. Wind scorched her face. The cart groaned under pressure as the rancher prepared to drag her to his property. Chains scraped as she was hauled toward the rear. Her brother never glanced back. The coins gleamed in his palm, cold metal warmed by betrayal. He waited until the cart wheel struck a root. Just enough jolt, just enough displacement. Then June acted. She twisted violently, driving her shoulder into the man beside her. The chain snapped as it caught against a rail. The rancher swore. She rolled, feet striking snow, knees buckling. Body tumbling into white, into cold, into liberty. The impact expelled air from her lungs. Her belly struck first. Agony shot up her ribs, but she was upright before they could cry out. Stumbling, bleeding, fleeing behind her, men hollered, boots pounded, but she didn't halt. Branches whipped her face. Ice carved her flesh. The world became a haze of gray and crimson and the piercing shriek of terror. Her breath ripped through her throat. Blood spotted the snow, bright against colorless earth. Her footwear was drenched, her jacket thin, her frame delicate. But she ran because inside her lived someone else. And that someone was not merchandise. She could sense it. The heartbeat that wasn't hers, pounding alongside hers like twin drums. The baby didn't wail, but she felt it reaching through her panic. A presence, a pressure, a determination. "Run, mama, run." So she did, through pines older than memory, past ravens who didn't bother scattering, over ridges no human foot had touched. That winter, her lungs seared, her knees shrieked. Her arms cradled her belly like armor. Nobody had ever shielded her. Not her father, dead from whiskey. Not her mother, buried with sorrow. And certainly not her brother, now bartering her flesh for metal. But she could shield this child, even if it destroyed her. Dusk arrived. Snow deepened. Wind moaned low and endless like a wolf-hunting solo. Her stride slowed, her sight dimmed, her fingers went numb. Still, she pushed forward. Then her foot slipped. She tumbled down a shallow gully, landing sideways in a drift, so deep it consumed half her form. The cold struck her mute. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't think. Then another kick, gentler this time. Not urgent, not frightened, just present. "I'm here," she whispered. Her lips were blue, voice fractured. "We're still here." She clawed ahead, pulling herself through snow. Trees encircled, shadows crept, until finally, there. A light, small, dim, but constant. It flickered through the woods just above the ridge. A shelter, perhaps a flame, maybe. A possibility? June didn't grin, she didn't weep. She simply moved slowly. One breath at a time, one prayer with each inch. Behind her, the snow guarded her secrets for now. Ahead lay warmth or death. But she would accept either so long as it wasn't captivity. She pressed her palm to her stomach again. The baby was calm now, still trusting. "Hold on, little one," she whispered through the darkness. "Mama's not finished yet." The wind changed just after twilight. Thomas paused mid-swing, axe halfway through a pine log. He tilted his head, listening. Years alone in the wilderness had honed his senses beyond the need for words. The sound was weak, labored breathing, and something softer beneath it. He dropped the axe. Moving swiftly, Thomas slipped through the tree line, boots crunching lightly over snow. A lifetime of solitude made him a phantom. He followed the broken branches and a trace of blood on white. Not animal Dot, then he spotted her, crumpled in the snow like a wounded bird. One hand curled protectively over her belly. Her lips were blue, hair matted with ice. Blood had hardened along her temple. The child within was evident 7 months, perhaps 8. Still, her body, curved as if she could shield the unborn through pure determination. She opened her eyes. They barely focused, but her mouth shaped a single word. "Help!" Thomas crouched, studied her. His brow creased, not in bewilderment, but assessment. Snow had half buried her already. Wolves would locate her before sunrise, or the freeze would. Either way, she wouldn't survive alone. He straightened, scanning the trees. Tracks, multiple boots heavier than hers, deep heel marks, men with substance, possibly horses nearby. They would come searching. He moved quickly. He grabbed pine branches, dragging them behind to sweep over the blood trail. He kicked snow across. Every footprint she'd left, one by one, looping the path to confuse direction. Dot in the brush behind her, he constructed a snare trap. Quick and efficient, not for beasts, for men. If they followed, they would retreat limping. He returned to her. She had stopped shivering. Thomas sighed through his nose. Then wordlessly, he bent down and lifted her into his arms. She was light. Too light, but her breath still came, soft and faint. "Damn fool," he muttered, freezing to death with a child. "What kind of madman leaves you out here?" He adjusted her weight against his chest, then started walking. His cabin was half a mile east, concealed in a grove of evergreens and draped in snow. Smoke no longer rose from its chimney, it only burned when necessary. He hadn't expected to need fire again this week. When they arrived, he kicked the door open with one boot, careful not to jar her too much. Inside, he lowered her onto a cot, beside the stove. The room smelled of pine resin, aged wool, and iron, clean, though sparse. Thomas moved without hesitation. He stirred the embers in the stove, layered it with fresh logs, and ignited the fire. Heat crawled out across the floor. Like a wakening creature, he removed her wet boots, set them near the hearth, then wrapped thick fur over her legs. Her fingers were ice. He tucked them beneath the blanket with gentle pressure. Only then did he speak again. "I don't feed strays," he muttered, half to himself. "I don't take in folks. But dying out there in my woods, that would waste good snow." He sat across from her and watched as color slowly returned to her face. Her breathing grew steadier. A flicker of something like peace settled in the furrow of her brow. He stared at the fire. It crackled orange and gold, licking the iron belly of the stove. He remembered another fire years ago, a different night. Screaming smoke, his daughter's small fingers slipping from his grasp in a burning doorway. He had not lit a fire for anyone. Since, now he stoked it again. For a woman he didn't know, for a child he'd never seen. He reached for the kettle, filled it with snow, and set it on the stove to melt. Outside, wind howled like something ancient and unforgiving, but inside the cabin pulsed with warmth, an old warmth, a dangerous one. The woman slept, lips parted, hair damp but thawing. Thomas said nothing more. But as he watched the fire burn, his eyes stayed on her belly. Not out of curiosity, but obligation. Because whatever she was fleeing had no place here, and whatever came next he would face quietly with axe or flame. For the first time in years he had lit a fire not just to survive, but to keep someone else alive. June awoke to the snap of flames and the aroma of pinewood smoke. For a moment she forgot her location. The world was quiet, still, strangely gentle. She blinked, head sinking into a pillow stuffed with straw and old wool. Her fingers curled around a blanket draped across her lap, heavy, coarse, but warm. She sat up slowly. The cabin was small, efficient. Every object had been placed for purpose, not beauty. A low shelf held tin cups, a kettle, bundled dried herbs. Beside the stove sat a pot of broth, steam still rising. A wooden spoon rested nearby, a small candle flickered on a table, and near the hearth, nestled in a corner like a treasure, stood a wooden cradle, simple, aged, hand-carved. Her breath caught. The cradle wasn't new. One leg had been repaired, but it had been positioned with care, angled to catch the fire's warmth, its interior lined with a folded quilt. She looked down at her own belly, swollen beneath the borrowed shirt. The baby kicked once, soft, present. "We're safe," she whispered. Thomas was absent, but his presence lingered in every rough-edged kindness. A wooden comb lay beside the candle. She ran her fingers along its spine. It had been sanded. Smooth. A leather strap hung by the door, likely for her boots. Now, drying nearby, and beside the pot of broth, a folded scrap of paper held one line in rough, squared handwriting. "Don't burn the stew, and don't lift anything heavy. Your belly is big." As a grain barrel, June smiled. It came unexpectedly, like warmth breaking through frost. Later that day, Thomas returned carrying 2 bundles of firewood on one shoulder. He nodded at her without ceremony. "You're up." "I am." "Good." He set the wood down by the stove. She watched him move, efficient, precise, like a man who'd learned to waste nothing. His beard was thick, flannel shirt patched at the elbow, boots leaving tracks of snow that melted in slow puddles on the wooden floor. "I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. "Don't, I mean it." "I don't do things to be thanked," he muttered, pulling off his gloves. "You needed heat, that's all," she nodded. He grabbed the stew pot, sniffed it, then added more salt. "Eat while it's hot." When she reached for a bowl, he paused. "Not that one." "The blue one's lighter, less to carry," June blinked. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" He grunted, ladling soup. She sat at the small table, sipping slowly. The warmth filled her chest and belly like something sacred. Thomas didn't sit. He moved around the room, checking shutters, adjusting the fire, always moving. As her eyes drifted across the cabin, something on the mantel caught her attention. A carved frame, uneven, delicate, clearly handmade. Inside, no photograph, just a name etched in soft looping script. "Ellie," she looked up. "Your daughter?" Thomas froze mid-step. For a second, his jaw tensed. Then, "Yes, is she not here?" "She was, long time ago," he exhaled. "Fire took her." House didn't stand much longer after that. June's hands went still. "On the bowl. I'm sorry," he nodded once. "Me too." She rose slowly, walked over to the cradle by the fire, ran a hand along its edge. This was hers, yes. Silence stretched between them, not heavy, just wide, like a canyon where grief still echoed. "I cry for mine too," June whispered. "And she's not even born yet." Thomas turned away slightly. "I'm not good at saving people. Never was." "You saved." "Me?" He shook his head. "No, I just hate seeing people freeze." He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. Before he left, he added, voice low, "But I can keep someone warm, that I can still do." And then he was gone again into the snow. Inside, June sat near the cradle. The fire crackled. Shadows danced. And for the first time in ages, she didn't feel like she was waiting to be discarded. She felt chosen. The days began to fold into rhythm. June learned to navigate the cabin like a second skin, where floorboards creaked, which logs burned longest. How to coax tea from the jar of dried herbs above the stove. Her body ached with weight, but the silence no longer frightened her. It wrapped her instead. Like an old wool coat, safe, familiar. Thomas moved through each day like a man half-tethered to the world. He didn't hover, but he noticed everything. When her knife dulled, he sharpened it. When the kettle grew stained, he scrubbed it clean with salt and vinegar. When the door hinge groaned, it was suddenly replaced by morning, but his words remained few. "Door won't slam now. Wind won't get in. Don't leave the stew pot empty. Bears might smell it. Don't thank me, I hate that." June watched him from the corner of her eye, curious. Every kindness came wrapped in bark. She tried once, over tea, I'm not used to this, she said. People doing things for me. Thomas replied without looking up. I'm not people. That night, the sky turned the color of iron. Wind scraped against the cabin walls, and June felt the baby roll low in her belly. Restless, she sat in the rocking chair near the hearth, mending the hem of a borrowed shawl when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Hooves faint, slow, distant at first, but approaching, June's eyes shot to the window. Nothing but black trees and snow. Then Thomas was beside her. No words, no questions. He pulled her to her feet and walked her quickly to the far end of the cabin. He pressed a panel in the back wall. It opened into a small crawl space beneath. The lean-to pantry. In there, he said, voice sharp. Take the blanket. Stay low, June obeyed, heart pounding. She eased herself inside, tucking her knees despite the heavy weight of her stomach. Thomas shut the panel just as the hooves stopped outside. She couldn't see him, but she could hear. The door opened. Cold rushed in, then a voice, gruff, unfamiliar, looking for a girl. Pregnant, white, late 20s. Might have come through. This way. Thomas's reply was low, even. You see a woman out here? She's not far along. A pause. We got reason to believe she ran this way. We're paid to bring her back. I'm not paid to talk. You live alone. Now I remember why. Boots scraped the floor. June held her breath. You mind if we look around? I do. Silence again. Then a second man's voice, more cautious. He's got a damn axe by the door. She ain't here, Thomas said. And if she was, I'd say the same thing. Now leave before the wolves start wondering what you smell like. Another pause, then retreating steps. The door creaked closed. She waited. 10 full minutes passed. Then the panel opened. Thomas stood there, jaw tight, axe still in his hand. They're gone, he muttered, for now. June crawled out, shaky. Her eyes stung with held-back tears. They'll come back, yes. What will we do? He met her gaze. We leave before the next snow. I know someone. She looked up, breath hitching. Where? Old woman knows herbs, lives near the river pass. O's. Me nothing, which means she won't lie to me. He began gathering supplies, moving fast now. Knife, rope, blankets, a small pouch of dried meat. Why are you doing this? June asked softly. Thomas paused, looked at her for a moment that stretched. Like a bridge across two broken lives. Then he said, gruff as ever, because I don't leave fires to go out on their own. He handed her a scarf. Wrap up, we ride at dawn. Just like that, the walls of the cabin, once so safe, so still, became too small for what followed next. But June understood. The fire he had lit that first night, it hadn't burned down. It had just begun to move. The wind had shifted. Before dawn broke, Thomas packed. No sound but the soft thud of supplies into canvas, the clink of a tin pot, the creak of wood under his boots. He moved fast, silent, focused. June stirred from the makeshift bed, clutching her belly as another pulse of pressure rolled through her spine. What's happening? She whispered. He didn't look at her as he pulled a blanket over her shoulders. We're leaving now. His eyes flicked to the window. They'll come back with more men, more questions. June tried to rise but faltered. The weight of the child bent her low. I can't move fast, she said. Thomas glanced at her, jaw clenched. Then I'll move for you. Without another word, he scooped her up, wrapped her in furs, and carried her to the wagon. He placed her gently on the straw bed he'd made in the back, then tied the cover down over her like he was wrapping something fragile that the world had no right to touch. The wagon rolled out through the trees, wheels muffled by snow. They moved in silence. June lay there, heart hammering, one hand on her belly. The baby kicked as if sensing something dangerous trailing them. She peered out through a slit in the canvas, catching glimpses of frozen pine, ice-coated branches, and Thomas's stiff back as he drove. At one point she asked, voice cracking, Where are we going? To someone who doesn't ask questions, he said. Someone who once saved me when I couldn't save anyone else? The day crawled by, sun hidden behind. Gray clouds. They stopped only once for water. Thomas brought her a canteen, helped her sit up, said nothing when she trembled, just wrapped the blanket tighter and moved on nightfall. The forest thinned, revealing a stone chimney rising from behind a hill. Smoke curled lazily upward. A small cottage sat beside a river, surrounded by brush and willow trees. An old woman stepped out before they reached the gate, as if she'd known they were coming all along. She was small but unbent, her eyes sharp as broken flint. "You brought the storm with you," she said to Thomas. He nodded once. "And the fire I need to keep lit." She looked at June, eyes flicking over her belly, her pale cheeks. "You did not make her this way." "No, but now she is mine to guard." He said nothing. The woman stepped aside. "Come in." Inside the house was warmer than it looked. Dried herbs hung from the beams. A stew boiled gently on the hearth. The woman laid June on a cot by the fire, hands careful but sure. "She's close," she said. "The child wants to come soon." Thomas stood nearby, arms crossed, face unreadable. "They'll find us, won't they?" June asked. "They'll try," the woman replied. "But this is my land, and I see the steps of guilt long before the guilty arrive." She handed Thomas a hot cloth. "Boil more water and sharpen your axe." That night they came. 3 men, loud, armed faces familiar with cruelty. The woman stepped outside before they could knock. "We're looking for a girl," the leader said. "White, late 20s, pregnant." The old woman tilted her head. "Funny," she said. "I see only wolves and wind tonight," the man frowned. "We were told she came through here. I see no one," she said again. "But I do see a man with hunger in his eyes, the kind that leaves stains on land and soul." The second man stepped forward. "We don't mean trouble." "No," she said, voice like a whip. "But you carry it anyway." Silence stretched. Then Thomas appeared just past the light, standing in the shadow of the trees, axe in hand, shoulders squared. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The way he held the axe, the way his eyes burned, not with rage, but with warning, made the men falter. "Maybe she went the other way?" one of them muttered. The old woman smiled. They turned, muttering, boots crunching snow. Inside, June watched from the shadows. She turned to the fire, her heart thudding not from fear, but from something else entirely. That night, as she lay beside the hearth, she whispered to the child inside her. "He stood like a mountain," she said, "and they turned like dust." Outside, beneath the moon, Thomas stood watch, silent, still, and unmovable as stone. The wind howled like a woman in mourning. It slid through the cracks of the old stone house, brushing the floor with fingers of ice, rattling the shutters like ghost knuckles. But inside, the fire burned high, casting a wild gold light across thick beams and ancient shelves lined with jars of herbs. Dust and stories. June was on the bed, knees bent, breath ragged. Sweat beaded her brow, mingling with tears she didn't remember crying. Her hands gripped the woolen blanket beneath her like it was rope keeping her from sinking into something vast and dark. Thomas stood nearby, stiff and pale. His shirt was damp with sweat, knuckles white where he clutched a cloth basin. "I don't know how to," he started. The old woman cut him off with a sharp look. "You keep trees standing in storms. You keep fire alive in broken stoves. You keep wolves away from something worth protecting." She placed a hand on his chest. "Tonight you keep her." He nodded, mute, then knelt beside June. "I'm here," he said. "That's all I know to be." June gritted her teeth through another contraction. "That's enough." The old woman worked with quiet precision, hands never trembling. She whispered in a language neither of them spoke, laying out cloths and herbs, checking the baby's position. Boiling water on the hearth. The wind screamed louder, slapping the windows. June's body buckled again. She cried out, one long, guttural sound torn from someplace ancient. Thomas caught her hand. It surprised them both. "You're not alone," he said. Her eyes locked with his, and then she didn't see fear. She saw stillness, like trees that had withstood centuries. "Breathe with me," he whispered. She did. Another contraction, another wave of pain. Her hands dug into his shirt, pulling, anchoring. He didn't flinch. He held the basin. He lit another candle. He pressed a cold cloth to her burning forehead. "Tell me what hurts," he said. Everything, she gasped. Then give it to me. She sobbed, not in pain but in trust. Thunder cracked overhead. The fire flared as if answering. The room felt both impossibly. Small and larger than anything she'd ever known, the old woman leaned forward. Now, girl, push, June screamed. Thomas didn't move. Another push. She nearly blacked out, then a sound, not wind, not fire. A cry, sharp, piercing, fierce. The child was born into this storm, between two people who had never asked for anything but were given everything in a single screaming instant. The old woman lifted the baby, cleaned and wrapped her in cloth, placed her against June's chest. She's strong, the woman said, like her mother. June stared at the tiny face, slick with life, eyes blinking into light. The baby wailed again, fists balled. June laughed, soft and cracked, but real. She's perfect. Thomas stood frozen. She's yours too, June said. He shook his head. No, but she reached out, took his calloused hand, pressed it to the child. She was born because you kept the fire burning. Because you stayed when no one else did. You held the storm back long enough for her to come. His breath caught. The baby stopped crying, eyes drifting open. You kept the fire for me, June whispered. Now I'll keep her for us. For a long time, Thomas said nothing. He just stood there, the storm wailing outside, a child breathing beneath. His fingers, and something like warmth rising in his chest that hurt more than any axe swing ever had. He smiled, almost. The cradle was finished by dawn. Thomas had carved it from pine, sanded it smooth, etched flowers along its curves, simple wild blooms, the kind that sprung up near riverbeds in spring. It was sturdier than the old one, made to last through winters, through weight, through time. He placed it beside the fire, then stepped back, rubbing the ache in his shoulder. June came in with the baby cradled against her chest, a blanket wrapped tight around them both. She paused at the sight. You made this? He shrugged. The old one squeaked. June ran her hand over the carvings, eyes misting. These flowers. I used to pick them with my mother before everything. She'd want the child to see them again. He said, turning away, voice flat. That night, June hummed lullabies she hadn't sung since childhood. The melodies were soft and strange in the air, like ghosts returning to the world. Thomas sat nearby, sharpening a blade, eyes half-lidded. He never joined in, but he never left either. He was always near, silent, steady, never farther than the next breath. Then one afternoon, the dogs began to growl. Footsteps approached. Wagon wheels. Thomas stepped outside, axe in hand. June stayed in the shadows, heart thundering. 3 men dismounted. The one in front held a paper. We're looking for a runaway. White woman gave birth recently. Her brothers put up a bounty. Thomas said nothing. The man stepped closer. We were told a woman matching her description lives around these parts. Thomas raised the axe slowly. She's a criminal, the man said. She's a mother, the man smirked. You hiding her? Thomas's eyes turned to steel. You want her? He said, you'll have to take me first. Something in his stance shifted, not just defiant, but something darker. A weight to his frame, a storm behind his calm. The kind of threat that came not from words, but from men who had nothing left to lose but one small light they'd sworn to keep alive. The man hesitated. The second rider nudged his shoulder. Not worth it. He's serious. Thomas didn't move. The men mounted again, casting glances back, but they didn't stay. When it was quiet again, June stepped out from the shadows. She held her daughter tightly, looked at Thomas, really looked. The worn lines in his face, the weather-beaten coat, the calloused hands still wrapped around the axe handle. And the eyes, not cruel, not soft, but burning with something no man had ever shown her. Loyalty. She walked up slowly. You didn't have to do that. He looked away. They weren't worth the fight. She smiled gently. You are. Thomas said nothing. She stepped closer. You're not just a roof, she whispered. You're a hearth, a place, a shelter. He furrowed his brow. She touched his arm. You're home, she said softly. Even without a roof, spring melted the last of the snow. The cabin stood taller now, expanded, reinforced, its roof patched and extended with fresh timber. A second window let in golden light, and beside it a new shelf held herbs June had begun drying. The cradle sat near the hearth, polished clean. A wooden table built by Thomas bore small notches where spoons had landed too hard, and laughter had followed. They had returned not just to the woods, but to a place they could call home. Thomas still rose before dawn, still chopped wood in silence, but his axe now rested beside toys he was carving. Tiny animals, little horses and bears, the kind a child would one day name. June nursed the baby by the fire. The girl, now months old, had Thomas's quiet gaze and her mother's mouth, always forming small, determined sounds as if she had a story to tell, the village nearby. Once a name spoken only in caution had begun to send word. An invitation, a festival, a fire. At first Thomas resisted. "We're not people for gatherings," he muttered. June had smiled. "No, but she might be," so they went. The ceremony was simple. A large fire circled by stone, surrounded by faces lined with weather and time. Children danced. Elders told stories. Bread was passed around in cracked bowls. June was invited to speak. Thomas shifted beside her, stiff in a clean shirt. The baby slept against his chest, wrapped tight in a woven sling. She stepped forward. Her feet felt heavier than usual, not with fear, but with memory, the kind that needed steady ground. She faced the flames. "My name is June," she said. "Once I was sold by my own blood," murmurs. "I was shackled. I was silenced. I ran not because I was brave, but because the child inside me kicked so hard I thought it was begging me to fight." She looked toward Thomas, then back at the crowd. "I was not saved by a hero in shining armor. I was not rescued with promises or poetry," her voice steadied. "I was found by a man who said little, who cursed under his breath and never smiled much. But he built fires, he left meat on the table. He sharpened knives so I could feed myself. And he stood between me and those who wished me gone." She touched her chest. "Not with speeches, but with shelter, with warmth, with a cradle carved from loss." The fire crackled louder now. "He never told me I was safe. He simply made it true." A hush fell. She stepped back, and in the silence Thomas stood. He approached her slowly. From his pocket he drew a small item, a wooden blade smoothed along the edge, carved with a single word: hope. He crouched beside their daughter, placed it gently into her tiny hand. "She outgrow it," he said, voice rough, "but she remember it was sharp once." The baby blinked up at him, the carved word resting in her palm. Later that night they returned to the cabin. The fire crackled inside, slow and warm. June rocked the baby, humming softly. Thomas sat nearby, carving a new piece of wood, brow furrowed in focus. Not because it was difficult, but because she would hold it one day. That was enough to make it holy. Outside, snow began to fall, quiet, unhurried. But it no longer carried memory, only silence. And that, finally, was peace. If the story touched something quiet in your heart, if you felt the snow, the fire, the weight of silence broken only by love, then you're one of us. Here at Wild West Echoes, we keep the flame of forgotten tenderness burning. These aren't just stories of the frontier. They're about people who choose love in the loneliest places, about hearts that keep beating long after the guns go quiet. If you want more tales of broken souls who find family in the most unlikely ways, subscribe to Wild West Echoes. Hit that bell so you never miss when the fire is lit again. Until next time, may your roads be rough enough to remember and your fires warm enough to stay.